Now, NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio with Lee Witting, whether you're listening on TalkZone, by podcast, through the archives of our ad-free shows on our YouTube channel, or by connecting through our Facebook page. In the summer of 2000, while in labor with her daughter, Krista Gorman's heart stopped for 8 minutes. Her soul transitioned to the afterlife, and in this interview, she describes a Bardo-like experience with threatening spirits who taught her the difference between empathy and compassion. Then, when she finally said okay, she was sped to a visit with angel beings and indescribable love. As she writes in her book, "Once I felt, okay, I'll go. I was instantaneously moving at a terrific speed through the liquid-appearing, flowing wall into a place that was just a brief white flash that emerged into a dense, dark, static space that was the same black particulate matter I was. It was much denser than my essence, and I quickly absorbed into it. Its divine warmth enveloped every bit of me. I felt like I'd become a part of the whole of the universe. It was all of me, and I was all of it. I encompassed every atom, every particle, every bit of its energy. I felt like I'd returned home." But with a new baby waiting, other beings gave her the choice to return, with the condition of sharing what she'd learned there with others. She accomplished that with her book, I Died and Learned to Live. Using the knowledge she was given, Krista used 12 principles to help her reconnect with the essence of who she was in the afterlife and embody it here in this life. Practicing these principles enabled her to live as the love she knew herself to be, while her transformation affected those around her as well. Krista, if you would, please tell our listeners about your near-death experience.
Oh, absolutely. Again, it was 14 years ago, like you had mentioned, and I had graduated from my PA training program 3 weeks before I was to be induced into labor with my daughter. And during the induction, it had been going on for a little while. After about 13 hours, I had started to have some shortness of breath that just came on very suddenly. And it just progressed rapidly to the point where I couldn't take in any more air. At that point, I passed out, and they were actually wheeling me out of the delivery room into the operating room to do an emergency C-section. So the last thing I remember was being in that hallway, and then the next point of my awareness was being kind of hovering, above my body, and watching myself in particulate matter sort of accumulate to that point above my body. So first I could see, and then I was watching these particles leave the body below and come up to where my eyes were, where my sight was coming from. I looked around and I thought, wow, this is amazing. I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't hear anything. All I could do was see. Physically I couldn't feel anything. I did have feelings, however. So I looked around the room and I saw what was going on, and I saw my body below me. Only I didn't know that it was my body. I didn't recognize it as a person. I was very detached and everything, nothing had a label to it. I was just simply watching this scene. And I watched the doctor take my daughter out of my belly. They did the C-section and hand her to a person at my right shoulder who took her and turned around. And I remember wondering, what's going on? I want to see, what are you doing? And then I saw somebody come in the room and step up to my body on the other side. And as I moved around the room, I started to become more attached to what was going on. And I wanted to know more. I became curious. As soon as I had that desire, that curiosity, I felt something pulling me to the left. And at first it wasn't very strong, and I resisted it. And, I want to stay is what I was feeling. And it pulled harder. So at that point I knew that I needed to go. So all of a sudden, in an instant, I was moving, and I was moving very rapidly. And I moved through a white space. It wasn't a light, but it was just a permeating white space, and it went by very quickly. And then I was in a space where I was reunited with the same particulate matter that I was. And it was just this benevolent, all-encompassing love. It overwhelmed me in a beautiful, wonderful way, and I just was immersed in it. And then once I felt that, I was then given the answers to all the questions I'd ever had in my life, and what they boiled down to was just exactly what I was feeling, which was love, no matter what the question. So I was thrilled to be there. I was enjoying it, and then off to my right, I saw a very faint, whitish gray light, sort of circular, and it got brighter and brighter and larger until I was just outside of it, and I was choosing to move towards that. It wasn't that I had to do it, but I was compelled to do it. It was calling me, and I was also wanting to go toward it. And once I got to that opening, there was a spirit. There were spirit figures, and there were shadow-like figures of people, although very ill-defined. And in the front was a little boy, and it was that little boy who was really drawing me in. He was calling to my empathy, my compassion, and he needed me. So, of course, I wanted to help him. And so I went through that space with the intention of helping, and there were adults around him, sort of surrounding him in the back. And so I moved into that space, and I moved along a line of these shadow figures, and then the little boy was gone. He wasn't there any longer. And I wondered where he was, and at the same time, these other people needed my help, too. So my feeling was, oh, my gosh, I want to help all of you. And as soon as I felt that, they started to come at me very quickly. They come at me and then move away, and come at me and move away. And I realized that what they wanted was my energy, and they were taking it for their own use, and they were depleting me of my energy. And I knew that if I stayed there, that I would be lost forever. And with that, I had the intention to leave, and I was being pulled away once again. And I was back in that static tunnel. I called it a tunnel, but it was really a space, that static space where I was again reabsorbed, and then I came very quickly to another opening, and this was less defined. I moved through it almost like it was a fluid kind of movement into this glorious, glorious landscape where there were yellow flowers spread out in front of me and green hills in the background, trees and blue sky. And off to my right, there was an evergreen forest, very dense evergreen forest. And to my left, there was a beautiful rocky waterfall with moss-covered rocks and very tranquil. And I was, again, my energy was just immersed in all of it, and I was a part of it, and it was a part of me. And what I refer to it as my Eden. And then I was flanked on both sides. I was flanked by these benevolent, loving, spiritual beings. That's what I can call them angels, I suppose, just because that's the word that we give entities like that. But they were beings that knew more than me. They were there to serve as my guides and almost like my mentors. And at that point, they gave me three choices. I could either stay in that beautiful Eden, I could move through there and go to what lay beyond, or I could return to my body. And it didn't take me very long at all to decide I wanted to come back. And, of course, they granted that. And as I was moving away, my energy was leaving them, almost going backward. They turned and they said, but if you leave, you need to share what you learned here. And I said, okay, of course. And then the next thing I remember was sort of waking up to pain in my chest. And what I realized after that was that was my neurologist rubbing his knuckles on my sternum to try to get me to respond. And what had happened was I'd suffered an amniotic fluid embolism and had gone into cardiorespiratory arrest for 8 minutes. And they actually had to stop chest compressions for 2 minutes while they delivered my daughter, and then resumed and had to put me in the ICU. So I was in the ICU for 3 days and recovered from that. So here I am talking to you.
Wow. So an amazing story. Let me take you back to where you first started encountering the spirits that were asking for your help. Was it like a ghostly realm? Do you feel you were still on the earthly plane, and these were spirits that hadn't figured out yet that they could go into the light?
Yes, in some sense. And it was a spiritual plane. And what I felt was that they had wanted my help, so that was their intention. My intention was, yes, I'll help you. So our energies were really pulling I was pulling them towards me almost, and they were pulling me towards them. And they had an agenda. they wanted my help, I didn't know what they wanted it for, and it didn't matter to me. I just had that intention of wanting to help. So when they started to take my energy and deplete my energy, I had a choice at that point. I could stay and help them and lose myself, basically sacrifice myself to these spirits for their benefit, or I could take care of myself and allow myself the choice to leave.
Right. And do you think, I'm sorry, do you think that if you had decided to stay and sacrifice yourself, that you would have become totally non-existent, that you would have, those particles that you were describing would have all flowed to other beings and you would be gone?
Exactly.
This is very interesting. So it sounds like their neediness was not something that you should have indulged them in.
Yes, and initially I felt that afterwards when I had recalled my experience and was contemplating it. And what I realized now, years later, was that the reason why I had that experience was sort of a test, because in my earthly life before, I had often allowed other people to use my energy to deplete me in serving them, in fulfilling their own needs, as giving of myself to the point where I had nothing left to give myself.
Do you feel like that's just part of the ordinary journey through to the light, is something that other people who might have an NDE might experience as well?
I do. Perhaps they may experience a similar thing. I believe that was created for me and by me so that I could, with the intention of me returning and sharing my story with other people, because these stories tend to alleviate fears in others. And when people are speaking to you about the problems that they've had in their lives or the things that cause them pain, oftentimes, it's our human nature to sympathize rather than empathize with them. So in the act of sympathy, we're actually, saying, I want to help you. I'm so sorry you're feeling this way. And it's sort of a depletion of our energy. When we're empathizing, it's more of a maintaining your footing in yourself while being of service to that person. So
right.
I needed to learn that lesson there in order to do what it is I came back to do.
Now, when you finally got through that area and came into what you described as your Eden, with the sky and the fields and the woods and so forth, there were other spiritual beings there, but they were of a different nature than the ones you'd encountered before?
Yes, very, very different.
And how did you know they were different? Did you recognize any of them? Were they friends or relatives who had predeceased you?
Well, I recognized the feeling that we shared between us. I had an experience when I was a child of a visitation of an angel, what I now know is an angel, and I was very, very small, and I remember how he made me feel. He made me feel loved, but it was a detached sort of love, and he taught me that is the kind of love that I needed to maintain for myself in order to live my life. It sort of goes along with the Hindu philosophy, I suppose, and in that detachment from material things. We're here to love and be compassionate, show compassion, but in a detached sort of way, not in an ownership kind of way. So I feel that it was related to the feelings that these spirit beings that I encountered in my near-death experience made me feel the same way that the angel made me feel when I was a child. So they were my guides. They were there to love me unconditionally, not to own me or to tell me what to do, but to guide me.
Tell us a little about the angelic visit. How old were you? What were the circumstances?
Oh, that was a really cool thing. I was probably about 4 years old, and I recall very vividly kneeling in my bedroom on the floor looking at a book, and I felt something next to me nearby, and it was on my left, and I turned, and I remember looking at my closet doors, knowing that it was there, but not seeing anything and being really confused about it. And then it communicated to me, and it was what I now believe was Archangel Michael, and he said, "I'm here to love you." And it wasn't a saying, it was more of it was just a feeling. I felt that, and I returned the feeling to him like my mommy and daddy. I wanted their love. I wanted their attention and time and energy, and I didn't get that as much as I needed it as a child. And he said, no, that's not the love you need. You need the kind of love that you give yourself, and then that love you can give to others. And then with that, he was gone. And I didn't really understand, but I knew he'd be there for me if I needed him. It was just this information, this knowledge that he gave to me. So he would be present. I'd be playing by myself in the months, years later, and he would just be there. He'd just show up. And then I had to think about him. That's all I had to do, and he would be there immediately. And then their time came where I needed him less and less. And one day, again, I was in my bedroom and kneeling on the floor, and I wished for him, and I looked up out the window waiting for him, and he didn't come, and I wished for him again, and then he appeared on my right side, and I say appeared, I felt him on my right side, and I knew he was there, and he moved through me into the center of my chest, and he said, you don't need me anymore. You have everything you need right here.
So this is very much like many children talk about having invisible friends, and they could be their guardian angels.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. And how old were you when he told you didn't need him anymore?
I was probably maybe a year older. And I remember the feeling of just that more independence, more self-reliance emotionally that I had. And I recognized that as, I was just wishing for him less and less. I didn't need him as much. And he knew that.
Did you feel disappointed when he was saying goodbye?
Yeah, just for an instant, for a brief instant. But I knew intuitively that's what needed to happen. And in that, I remember feeling that and then saying, oh, okay. And I got up and I remember going outside looking for some of the neighbor kids to play with.
Now, going back to Eden, was it a difficult decision for you to say, no, I don't want to stay here in this perfect place, I want to go back? Or...
Yeah, again, everything is sped up. It's so fast. And for an instant, I wanted to move on. I wanted to move through there and to see what lay beyond there. And then I don't know why, but I just said, no, I'm going back. And I didn't know at the time the reason for that.
Well, of course you'd had a baby, so that must have been one reason.
Yeah. Well, I knew on some level, I'm sure that that's what it was, but I certainly didn't remember it when I woke up. I had no idea I was even pregnant.
Wow. Now, you have said when you did come back, you I guess first tried to tell people about it, but they didn't understand, and so you just shut up and pushed the whole experience away from you?
Yes, exactly. And people who have had, as you know, people who have had near-death experiences yourself, it's such a profound thing. Words fall short. You can't really find the right words to describe it. And I tried to find the words, and I was frustrated because I just couldn't describe the depth of the experience and how much it had changed me fundamentally. And they were, their energy was, oh, we're just glad to have you back. We want you to be the person that you were before. And so, we're all energy, and I felt that. I wanted to be that person on some level because I wanted them to feel okay. I wanted them to feel better about me. And that's where my struggle really came in was, but I had this profound experience that I came back to be the love that I felt in the afterlife and to share that love with everybody. And in order to be that love, it would just take so much of my old self away from me, I suppose, and replace it with that deep love. And I felt on some level, that my family, though they loved me, they would never be able to understand it. They would never be able to understand me. And so that brought the fear in. And it sort of drew me back to who I was before.
And then I guess things didn't work out so well for a while because your husband got ill.
Yeah, for the several years following my experience, and not living as the person I knew I was, to the extent that I felt I needed to do it, I was just very unhappy, and I lived unhappily for the most part. I'd smile and joke and have fun, but underlying it all, I was unfulfilled and not truly happy. At the same time, my husband was a touring musician, and so he was gone for months at a time. He'll come home and for months and then go away again. So during the times that he was gone, it was pretty difficult to maintain myself in my life, and so I suffered from depression and anxiety. And then he became really sick with, he has Crohn's disease, and he had some complications related to the Crohn's disease that made him very ill. But we didn't know what was wrong with him for a long time. So during that time, things got real. Things got really real. We didn't know if he was going to live or die. So that creates a rawness in you that life becomes very acute. You live in the moment, and that's where my healing really began.
Yeah, I see that as a chaplain. I see that happening in families all the time. There's nothing like a physical crisis to bring on spiritual growth. So then you absorbed the NDE experience into your life?
Oh yes, I realized that because it had been poking at me over the years. I have it in the back of my mind. It was always there, and it would come forth into my consciousness, and I'd push it away, and then it was continuing to do it. And when my husband became ill, and my consciousness and my spirituality started to shift, that was when my near-death experience really just full force was in my consciousness. Wow. And my daughter was born on 7/17, and seemingly randomly, I'd see 7/17 everywhere. And then, just memories of my near-death experience would pop up, and I found myself allowing them to remain and to really feel them again, and to go through that process of integration into my spirit, into my soul once again. And through that came what I write about in the book, The 12 Principles for Daily Living, which through feeling that experience and re-experiencing it in the body, I was able to heal. And I started to live my life differently, and I lived my life through the 12 principles. And it just brought this miraculous healing to us all. And we continue to experience its benefits today, every day, every minute of every day.
Has talking about your NDE and writing about your NDE given your husband hope, and has it given him spiritual strength? Tremendous.
I can't even tell you the transformation, like the profound transformation that's occurred in him. He sees himself completely differently. He grew up in a violent kind of household, and sort of maintained that in some regard. When he was a musician, he was playing in a hardcore music band and around people who were fairly negative, and so that's where he felt comfortable. When he became ill and then recovered, he realized that he needed to change his way of thinking and way of existing, basically. And he saw this transformation happening in me, and he realized, wow, she has something there. What is it? And so we worked together, and he is so different today. His energy is completely different. His life is just so much richer and happier, and he trusts himself and believes in himself so much more, and it's just beautiful to see that.
Yeah, I think it's amazing how hearing about near-death experience can strengthen people. The teller of the tale is often embarrassed at first, or a little bit scared to even be talking about something so strange. But the hearer of the tale, if they finally accept it as being true, can grow enormously without having had an NDE themselves. They can learn a powerful message from it. Well, tell us now something about the 12 principles, how you came up with them, and maybe you could run through a list for us.
Oh, sure. Well, I came up with them really just through meditation and really focusing on the message from my near-death experience. And, I mentioned it's so hard to describe it in words, and I wanted to be able to do that. I wanted to be able to write it down on paper, how I got to the point I was at in my healing process using my near-death experience. And, what are the things I was doing in order to heal myself? So the 12 principles include the physical manifestation of that spiritual process. And they are live in awareness, and the awareness of who we are, which are, spiritual beings and physical bodies, that we're integrally connected to the universe and are made up of divine love. Live willingly, which is allowing that to integrate into your life, and also having the flexibility in every area of your life to allow people to be who they are, allow yourself to be who you are. And I'll just go through the rest of them sort of briefly. Live lovingly, fearlessly, compassionately, patiently, presently, spiritually, faithfully, purposefully, creatively, and miraculously.
And how could someone buying this book, how could they put it to use in their lives?
Well, it's really an individual process for each person, but my recommendation is to take just very specific situations or circumstances in one's life and take the principles and journal about it, think about it, meditate on it, and see how we can apply the principles in that situation in order to bring about more love and understanding, compassion, grace, and ultimately a happier, more joyful existence.
My thanks to Krista Gorman for sharing her enlightening experience, and thanks to all of you for listening. If you'd like to hear this show again or any of our more than 500 archived, ad-free NDE interviews, go to TalkZone's NDE Radio site and hit the Past Shows button, or go to our YouTube channel, NDE Radio with Lee Witting, where you can subscribe to and comment on the complete NDE Radio library. And listen next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern at TalkZone for more NDE Radio. I'm your host, Lee Witting, saying once again, thanks for listening.